Hello and welcome to another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon with Drake and Marie. Today, we are actually going to have a different episode. Now, last episode, we promised that we would finish up with punctuation, with scenes and dialogue and so on. But then we looked at the number of episodes that we currently have uploaded and realized that this is our 100th episode. And we felt that that just wouldn't be a suitably epic episode for 100. So instead, we will do our punctuation, follow up on dialogue tags and so on. But today, we are going to discuss our journey as podcasters, what it has meant for us as writers, as podcasters in terms of marketing, and all of the kind of associated things and what you can learn out of it if you want to start getting a social media presence. So with that out of the way, I am Marie Mullaney. I am one of your hosts. I have a YouTube channel called Just in Time Worlds, and I write epic fantasy. And with me today is my partner in crime,
Oh, you
Cassius.
used to say Drake. I'm Max Alexander Drake. Go by Drake. I am an award-winning novelist. Teach writing all over the world. Yeah, I write a lot.
Before we start, as always, even for this episode, we need your help. Share, thumbs up, give us 5 stars. You know, we're on platforms that do allow you to give us stars, and stars are always pretty. 5 stars. Anything else is just very hard to give.
Yeah, it's a lot of work if you want to actually try to give less than 5 stars. Not worth your time.
Exactly. Okay, so I guess if we start at the beginning, we met 2 years ago.
Well, actually, I want to start. I want to actually say something before then, because
Okay.
I just realized that even after doing this because it was 2020, wasn't it? So I think it was closer to 3.
No, it was 2021. It was
Okay,
2021. Yeah. Because 2020, I was still busy
right,
writing. It was only 2021 where I
right,
actually moved to be ready to publishing and started looking for like authors to talk to.
right. No, you're right, because it was like literally not too soon before I was diagnosed with cancer.
Yep.
Um, which threw a monkey wrench into our entire process. Um, but no, so it's been 2 years, and I like I think the dumbest thing about this entire journey is that this is a 100th episode, and I still don't know how to introduce myself at the beginning of them. Like I realized that when I was talking, I was like, I've never figured that out. It's always this awkward, like, hey, um, maybe one day I'll figure that one out. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there that it just made me giggle when I was like, you still have a horrible way of introducing yourself, even after 100 episodes. I don't think I've ever done it well. Anyway, let's go back 2 years ago.
So 2 years ago, I reached the end of writing The Hidden Blade. I had decided to self-publish. And so I started reaching out to authors that I might know in a sideways fashion or who would answer an email and invite them for interviews on my channel and then try and kind of sneak in and would you like a copy of my book to blurb? And that's how I met James as well. And we hit it off, but not as well as you and I did. When we had that first interview, we spoke, man, it must have been an hour and a half. I remember because at that time, I was cutting the episodes on my channel to 20-minute chunks because I was like, I don't think I should go over that. And I had to cut your interview into 3 chunks to release.
I talk too much.
And then you did actually take the book when I said, would you mind taking a look at this and so on? And you gave me first you liked it, which was great. But you also gave me amazing feedback, which I then proceeded to implement in the second book. But it was in that second meeting that we then set up a meeting, I think, for the third meeting. And at the third meeting, I was like, we should do something together. And you were like, yes, I was thinking the same thing, but I can't organize anything. I'm like, well, I'm good at organizing stuff.
Actually, my actual thing was, yes, I'm a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
I had to explain what that is, because that's my, and I've said that before on this thing. Anytime I do anything like this, I need to have somebody. So the reason why I say I'm a cheeseburger is, I'm a delicious cheeseburger. People love to eat me, but cheeseburgers don't run restaurants. We don't order stock. We don't cash people out. We don't run payroll. Like, we are just cheeseburgers. In the past, I used to try to be the business. I mean, I did own a $4.5 million computer company that I ran. And that was really where I learned a lot of this, of what I'm not good at. And you hear this all the time when you talk about, or if you listen to any type of like entrepreneur type classes or channels where they'll talk about the different types of people, and that you want, each one of these. So one is I don't remember exactly the terms they use, but one is the imaginative guy, the inventor, the one that comes up with the ideas, the idea man, whatever they call them. That's what I am. And that's what I'm really good at. And I am terrible at just rote, mundane stuff. I just always have been. And if anything, that's what hurt my computer business more than anything else. Even though it was really successful, it took me a while to kind of understand that I'm just not good at things. And that's a hard thing to do for people, to admit, oh, I suck at these things. I cannot do these things if I do these things. I mean, I even made the comment the other day to the guy that I'm doing the writing room with, because he was like, well, how do you want to handle, like when we get to payroll, how do you want to handle payroll? And I'm like, oh, well, if you have me do payroll, we will go to jail for tax fraud. Not because I will, do anything illegal. I just won't do it. And he's like, oh, so I guess I am going to be handling that. I'm like, if you don't want to go to jail, you probably want to do that. So that was really my answer, and that is the honest truth of why I never did a podcast, is because I know I won't do all the stuff that comes along with it. I don't have it in me.
Yeah. So I have the same aversion to rote, repetitive tasks, but I am really good at automating things. I am exceptional at creating automation, which just cuts down enormously on whatever I'm doing. You can't do that with audio editing, unfortunately, although you can do a lot of things with a workflow, but you still have to actually listen to everything. But that is the only thing that is unautomated now. So it takes me 1 hour a week, and I'm like, that's fine. I can do that.
Completely sidetrack. I haven't tested it out yet, but AI is infiltrating basically everything. And I do know that the new Adobe Auditions has incorporated an AI thing for just voice. So if you're a podcaster, if you're whatever, I haven't tested it out yet, but I'm actually kind of interested in seeing what that does.
So the thing is, what that'll do, I think, is probably things like breath control, humming, and so on, which already have a workflow for.
Right. Well, it also takes out, I mean, I watched the video on it. It also takes out like background noise and
but all of that stuff
amplifies the voice and which I have, I have racks already set up, and I have a flow through, and it doesn't take me long. But it's just kind of interesting that what took me long was the 6 months of learning how to build that rack.
Yes, that exactly. Like, it has taken me ages to learn how to do that.
Right. And then the problem with that, even though I've got that rack set up, I can't use that for like your voice. Like, so when we started the Magic Fall book, which we need to get back to, but we started the audio recording of that, my settings do not work for your voice. So I had to go through each one individually again. And then also remember, like, because I set them up and saved them. And it's like, what was the settings on this? And so adjust them so that your voice sounds just as good at the end of the process. So, I'm actually still kind of excited. I think that, if it does what the video claims that it does, which it never does, but if it even gets close to that, that is an automated task that I'm going to be pretty excited about. And like I said, just a rabbit chase.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, so I think that from a technical perspective, when we started, there was so much neither of us knew. Like, I'd been running the YouTube channel for a couple of months at that point, so I had a fair idea of YouTube, but I'd never done a podcast. So, and it's a little bit of a different animal from YouTube. So the YouTube videos tend to be shorter, punchier, with a definitive script, because people who are consuming a video on YouTube, that's generally like what they want from an informational video. But podcasts tend to be a little more rambling, a little less scripted, a little less tight. So there was that adjustment, but there was also the introduction. So when we started this, and I don't know if you're a very long time listener, you might remember this, we had this introductory segment, which was pre-recorded and was just us saying, like, this is who we are, blah, 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 blah. And then we'd start with a podcast. But over time, looking at our podcast performance, we'd have people who drop off in the middle of that because they're like, yeah, I know, this is boring, and they drop off. So we moved away from that, and I cannot remember which episode we moved away from it, but at some point we moved away from it into the live introductions, which Drake clearly has still not mastered.
And I do want to say, you say we, I had nothing to do with that. I don't even know, you're just like, oh, I didn't know anything back then. I was just, when you were saying that, I was like, I still literally, I have no idea anything you do for this podcast. Like, it just magically shows up. That's all it is. It's sort of like my laundry. I put my laundry in this basket, and then it just shows up in the closet. It's really amazing. So that's really, I honestly, I don't want to take any credit on this whole, because you're the one that looks at that stuff. You're the one that makes those decisions. You're the one that, I mean, it really has been all on you, which I'm completely thankful for.
So for anybody who's curious, there is a platform called Buzzsprout, which is where we host our podcast. So I upload the episodes to Buzzsprout, and I upload the episodes to YouTube, because YouTube doesn't integrate with Buzzsprout. But Buzzsprout then distributes the podcast to every other podcast platform. They distribute it to like a bazillion different platforms. So if you're thinking of doing a podcast, I can highly recommend Buzzsprout. It costs me $18 a month for our uploads, and I mean, we have a fairly substantial upload schedule, in terms of like hours uploaded. So you can probably get I can't remember what their packages are, but $18 is not a lot of money. And they then distribute it to a vast array of podcast platforms, Audible, and to whatchamacallit,
iTunes,
Spotify,
actually.
and iTunes, and everything. Our biggest platform is iTunes. We get a lot of downloads through Apple Podcasts. Sorry, not iTunes. Apple Podcast is our single biggest one, and they then aggregate all of the stats from those different platforms, which allows me to see these kinds of details and so on.
So for the writer's room, I do have a room that lists out the podcast, and it doesn't integrate. And so I was like, okay, do I manually get the links to every single episode and put the descriptions in that? And I was like, no, I don't have time for that. So I actually came up with a different idea where I was like, well, I'll just find some of these platforms, and I'll just put links to the Releasing Your Inner Dragon podcast on that. And so I got this list, and I don't even know half these, but YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Buzzsprout, all those, I was like, yeah. But then, as I just kept Googling this stuff, Googling Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I've got Listen Notes and Podash and Podbay and Podcast Addict and Podtail and Rephonic and TuneIn. And like, I'm like, I've never even heard of these things, but they all hosted Releasing Your Inner Dragon. So I just made this page for my members of the writer's room, that if they wanted to listen to my podcast, they have a list. And then I tried to just include, quite a few of the podcast channels, or platforms, just in case. Oh yeah, no, I do listen to Podash. I don't know what Podash is, but I'm sure it's Podash, I don't know. It's Pod and Ash.
Yeah.
But I just made this long list, and I could have kept going even further than this because there were just so many.
Yeah.
But I figured this was a good enough list.
So, and I mean, you should probably put Fountain on there, since it's the one we claimed on one of our listeners, very much insistence.
Oh,
yeah, Fountain Podcasts. If anybody listens to us on there, we are claimed, and you can stream eSats to us, which is how you show your love for us on Fountain. But yeah, so Buzzsprout is basically my go-to platform, and then it pushes out to all of these other associated platforms. And then I occasionally check on Apple specific stats and on Spotify specific stats, because they have some specific stats. And of course, I check the YouTube stats, because of course I check my own YouTube channel stats, and that gives me quite a lot of feedback on, which episodes are doing well and which episodes have got the most kind of view time, so people don't drop off it and so on. And that informs a lot of our decisions on what to talk about. So, for example, if we get a lot of traction on writer's craft, which is why we do a lot of episodes on writer's craft. We get a lot of traction on things like how to do world building organically, how to show, not tell, how to do characters and motivations, how to start a story, how to end a story. Those all get a lot of traction. And so we do a lot of episodes along those lines. It's just, we go where the audience is. And I guess if you're going to whether you're going to self-publish or traditional publish, because even a traditional author can't just sit on their rear and do nothing for marketing. I mean, Brandon Sanderson has a YouTube channel, and he broke $1 million on, Kickstarter. So for his book, like some enormous amount of millions.
43 million.
Yeah, some enormous amount of millions, So you cannot just, even if you're traditionally published, even if you're huge, you cannot just sit and do nothing social media wise, right? Or on a website, or some way of engaging with your fans. So if you're going to do something like podcasting or YouTube channeling, something like that, then pick what you're going to talk about, get a good platform going. And then I guess the other big thing is, from a technical perspective, you're going to need good sound. You can get away with almost any camera. Okay. I've got now a very fancy web streaming camera, because I've started live streaming on my YouTube channel. But before that, I had like a $20 webcam. It's not the camera that's important. The important part is the mic. So I have two mics, actually. I've got my big Shure mic, which is quite an expensive item that I use for my books and so on. And then I got this little podcast camera, which is the first camera that I bought, the first microphone that I bought. And it has a good, clear sound, but it picks up a lot of the room.
So I did a lot of research on that for, because I actually bought this mic when I was recording the cartoon, and I had actors coming into the studio and all that. And so that's where this one, and it wasn't that much. I don't think it was $250. But it's an Audio Tectonics. And it was rated really high, and I've been very happy with it. I mean, I've had it for, I bought it, I think, in 2019 when I started working on that cartoon. So, yeah, and I use it for everything. And then, I just have a whatever what's the big brand of webcams? It's like a $70-$80 webcam, whatever. I mean, I keep wanting to say Canon. I don't think it's a Canon. Just one of the big name brand ones.
I have a Logie. So, yeah.
Oh, maybe it is. I think it is a Logitech.
Yeah, Logitech.
I think it is. Yeah, the only thing I really wanted, because I do have weird paranoias, is I definitely wanted it to have a case that I could close, because I can't sit here, even when it's off, I can't sit here and have the camera looking at me. It just feels really weird. And so when I'm not recording, that case is closed. And like, I'm so paranoid of it. And it's a weird paranoia. It's not, I don't think it's like an insane thing of mine, but like every time I sit down the computer, I'm just in the habit now. I just reach up and just run my fingers across it. It's always closed, but I just do it as habit because I don't know. You get all those stories of people hacking your computer and then recording you. And like, I don't want you recording me when I don't know what's going on. What if I pick my nose or, something like that? I don't want to take the chance of that. So, although I do think it's fun, you get the emails. I haven't seen one in forever, but I used to get a ton of spam of, hey, so I hacked your computer and I recorded you while you were looking at one of those nudge, nudge, wink, wink, naughty websites. And so you need to pay me money or release the videos. And I'm like, so you didn't record me doing that. So I'm good. Like, I'm fine. You can release any videos you want because you didn't catch me doing that. So
No.
yeah.
So, and then just in case anybody is going onto YouTube or whatever, I still, to this day, I record my YouTube videos with my iPhone. And the reason why I record with my iPhone is because it has a 4K camera on it. And if you want to buy a 4K camera that isn't attached to your phone, that is an expensive piece of equipment. And all it does is take video. Whereas, my phone can actually make phone calls as well as it doesn't,
Right.
but it can make phone calls as well as access the internet and take videos.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm doing, so I've got two Samsung, like an S20 and an S21, and the S20 is not hooked up to anything. So it just sits in a tripod kind of up. And then I put my normal one right here when I want high quality. And then I get two angles to be able to record by, and then I can switch back and forth.
Yeah. So yeah, don't go out and buy a super freaking camera or whatever, unless you have one, unless you are like into photography or whatever. Don't do that. Just
but even for YouTube, I don't know if I would record in 4K. Streaming the stuff over, I mean, not saying that that you shouldn't. I'm just saying, me personally, no one cares about the quality of a talking head because that's all I do. I just make talking head videos. So I'm either doing writing classes or I'm doing, writing motivational stuff, or I'm doing writing critique stuff, or the podcast, the writing podcast. It's always just a talking head. So you don't need to see every pore on my nose. It just you don't need it. And so I exclusively use this little Logitech webcam for what you're seeing me on right now. And I think it's fine.
The reason why I use the camera on my phone specifically for the YouTube videos is because I green screen to insert just my talking head onto the writing boards. And the higher quality of the phone makes the green screening smoother.
Yep.
So
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And for those of you who are curious how to green screen, I bought 2 green sheets off Amazon and hung it up on a garden, on a stock standard rail on one of my walls. That is a green screen. So,
yep.
Yeah.
I actually have one. I've never used it because it's just annoying, but I actually have it's sitting right there because I even tried to use it not too long ago, but it attaches to the back of my chair and it's like this big peacock.
Oh my goodness.
And so the problem is I have this wall right here. And so I don't have this way. I've got unlimited space. So if I shift it all the way down, I could probably get away with using it. And then, I have a full green screen kit.
So there's the corner of my green screen. It's literally just a, you can get them off Amazon. They're cheap as chips. And then you have a green.
It's just to make sure it is as flat as you could possibly make it. When you have the waves in it, those can cause you some grief in the editing phase. But I mean, even that, they've gotten the keying down.
Oh, the keying, The keying's
I
so easy
use,
these days.
yeah, I use Adobe Premiere, and
Yeah.
even with the waves in it, it does a really good job of getting rid of all that stuff.
I use Cyberlink because it is literally a tenth of the price of the Adobe product suite. So,
Yeah.
and it does great on the editing side. So can highly recommend that. If you're looking for an audio editor, which, not just video, Audacity is free and amazing, absolutely amazing. So,
Yep. Yeah, the reason why I use Adobe products is one, I get a teacher discount on it, so it's actually very, very affordable instead of being whatever it is, like $1,500 a year or something insane like that for the full thing. And it gives me everything.
yeah.
And I need it because I do so much in Photoshop. I do so much in After Effects for animation. I do so much um, um, InDesign for all my typesetting and everything like that. So since I have Premiere and I have Auditions and I have all these other things, I just use all the Adobe products.
Adobe's price just made me cough. I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Because it was at a point where my YouTube channel wasn't monetized. And I was like, I am absolutely not spending this amount of money on a channel that makes no money right now. There is no
Right.
way.
But
So,
the teacher package is like $300 a year for everything. You get literally
yeah,
everything.
but I'm not a
And
teacher.
right.
So, yeah.
So it just works out.
Yeah. So yeah, so I can recommend Cyberlink. It's pretty solid. It's got some good editing, and then yeah. So I guess that's from a technical perspective. But then as a writer, like this has been a different journey. So for me, when I spoke to you the first time, I think all of our listeners are going to laugh now, but I swear I did not actually know what the difference was between active and passive voice. I am not a native English speaker. English is my second language, and I only ever did it as a second language. And I've never diagrammed an English sentence in my life. So, so I know that there are people who are like, it can't be true. I promise you it is true. It is not my native language. So, which is why I have some strange pronunciation issues here and there.
Which I don't even correct anymore. I just let you go with.
So, it is what it is. I'm at this point in my life, I'm 40 years old. There are things that are never going to change.
Right.
So, but for me, the initial amount of learning through these podcasts was immense. I learned what filtering was. I learned what active versus passive was and why active voice is better. I learned about a whole slew of writing craft things, like right along, I guess, with all of our listeners. The how to do descriptions, how to make things personal to the character, how to write emotions. Emotions were, and probably to an extent still are, my biggest weakness. Like adding in enough emotions and not being repetitive on how I describe emotions. I'm not a spy, I'm a human being. um, and all of those kinds of things is still something that I'm working on. But yeah, my growth as a writer, if I look back at the first copy of Hidden Blade and to where I am now, the difference is astronomical.
Yeah. Well, it's the reason why, and this is probably going to get me in a hot water, but it's the reason why I hate the world we live in, where everyone just judges everything by superficial stuff. So in the beginning, I had some female fans that reached out to me and they were like, oh, you're just being the typical male chauvinist and you just won't let her speak at all. And it's just all you. I'm like, yeah, I'm letting her speak as much as she wants to speak. And that's as much as she wants. I mean, so if you watch over these 100 episodes, you become more and more and more vocal as you grew. And I mean, because that was one of the things in the beginning, one of the things you had said was you wanted to do like a Drake podcast with you as like a student or whatever. And I absolutely flat out said, no, if we do this together, we are equals. You are an author, I am an author, and I will do it no other way. And yet still, like I said, I had some women reach out to me and be like, you're just doing this thing. I'm like, no, like if I'm the one that has the most to say on this topic, like this episode is very heavy because I don't know most of the stuff that you're talking about. And so I'm just going to sit here and nod and smile and, because that's the way it should be. Each one of us have different strengths and weaknesses, and the person with the strength should be the one that kind of talks about it. So yeah, in the beginning, I did talk. If you go back and listen to those episodes, it's like 80% me and 20% you. But as you've grown as an author, and as I've grown as a podcaster, and like it's organically become what it is. But I don't think, at least I don't feel that I did. I don't think I ever was like, talking over you. I was always trying to encourage you to do as much as you were comfortable doing.
No, I've never felt that you spoke over me. And I mean, I've had people say the same kinds of things. Like, he just talks over you, he doesn't let you speak, whatever. And I'm like, but I don't have anything to say. I'm learning. Like, it's not something that comes naturally to me yet. When it does, believe me, like, I am a perfectly capable, competent speaker, but I'm not going to talk about something that I'm not convinced I understand.
When that is actually the heart of why I agreed to do this. So we had a couple little meetings where, I was kind of helping you out with your writing, because I really did like the story and I liked where you were at as far as the writing, all that. But the thing that impressed me the most about you was you were the first and only person I've ever worked with on a writing standpoint where I would say, okay, so basically it works like this, XYZ. This is what you should think about. And then it was never seen again. Normally, people, I'll go, okay, well, here's what filtering is. You shouldn't filter. This is why it weakens the writing. And then the next week I'll go, okay, you're still filtering here. Remember, this is what it is. And this is why and then the next week it's okay, you're still filtering. And then like 6 months, 8 months, a year down the road, it's like, oh, look at that. You're no longer filtering. How awesome is that? And that's just normal. That's everybody. That's me. That's literally the entire world. And just in those first couple of times we got together, you literally just absolutely absorbed and implemented the information like on a dime. And so I was just so blown away by that and so impressed by your ability to grow exponentially every step of the way, that's what made me go, yeah, I really would love to do something with you, because that's an amazing, I don't have that trait. So, that is an amazing ability. And so, yeah, like your growth through this as a writer, I mean, I read your stuff now and I'm just like, I don't know if I'm that good. Like, I'm serious. There's some things that you've written, and there's some other things. Again, we've talked about a lot of this through Magic Falls. You've already mentioned it. You're definitely a lot colder and deader inside than me when it comes to emotions. So, but I'm a bleeding heart, crybaby, expose everything romantic. So, like, it's going to take a lot for somebody to catch up to me on that side because of the fact of how much I wear my heart on my sleeve. So, but I have things, that I'm working on as well. Everybody has those things that I mean, you even taught me something just recently that I talked about on, I think it was one of my critique groups. I talked about it where I didn't realize. Yeah. So, this person had given too much information about this thing. And I'm like, look, if you had held this back, it would have been so much, better. And they were like, yeah, I know I give too much away. And yeah, that's a good advice. And I was like, it's okay. I give away too much too. And they're like, no, you don't. I'm like, actually, I do. It was pointed out to me recently. And so I talked about, how, but then I said, but you give away nothing. You're like, you get nothing. And I'm like, that's not good either. You can't just give away nothing. And so there's a balance in there that you have to kind of work toward. But I mean, we're all working. I mean, that's the thing is every single writer. And I think that, so this is old school Drake. This is something that I realized before I was Drake, that I always said that if I ever go down this path, I'm never going to do. And that is you get that new author and you read their first book and you're like, oh, this is actually pretty good. It's not great, but it's actually pretty good. and then they hit New York Times bestseller, whatever, and then their next book is less, and their next book is less, and their next book is less, and by the time you get to the fourth or fifth book, they're just horrible writers and horrible storytellers. And I think that it has to do with attitude. They are like, oh, I was a New York Times bestseller, so obviously I know everything and I'm perfect in every single way. And I think if you have that attitude, you'll just spiral down into just oblivion. Whereas if you're like, I don't care that I'm, everyone loves what I write. I still have so much to learn. I still want to grow. I still want to do this. And I think that's the attitude that I've always had. And I think it's the attitude that you've always had. And I think that is the key to really being a successful writer.
Absolutely. And I think, like, for me, one of the things that I'm still working on and that I'm still learning from is like the tightness of plot, and not just the tightness of plot, but where to give more information. Because, like you say, I write like I hold everything back like a miser deciding whether they're going to spend $1 or not. Like, I'm like,
Really
am I going to give you this piece of information? Look at it. Look. No, I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, I mean, it's fine, but there is a very fine balance of getting to the point where people actually don't understand what's going on because you haven't.
Right. Well, and it took that contrast, because until that contrast of working with you on Magic Fall, I felt that I was pretty much nailing that. And I was. I mean, I still am really good. But it was that contrast of, I actually, working with you showed me that I could pull back even a little bit more and it be more, because that's what we're talking about here. When you do that, you're building drama, you're building suspense. I've told this story before where I had a beta reader who read a thing of mine where I introduced this big fighter dude, and in chapter 1 they're like, oh, you have to have a fight in this scene. I can't wait to you've got to rewrite this chapter. He's got to fight in this chapter. And then in the next chapter of his, he gets into a fight, but it's only the end of a fight. I don't do the whole thing. And they're like, oh, this was great, this was awesome, but you got to rewrite this chapter, and I got to see the whole fight. And I'm, the whole time I'm just thinking to myself, you're feeling exactly what I want you to feel, the desire to read that next chapter, because I'm not giving you full satisfaction. I'm giving you a desire to be fulfilled. So you're going to keep reading to get that fulfillment. And so that's what it is with secrets and information and all this other stuff. So yeah, we're all working on things is basically the point.
Yeah.
To get to there.
Like, one of the things that I guess for me exemplifies my journey the most is we just started doing the podcast when you sent me the first 60,000 words of Genesis Oblivion, of the edited, the new stuff. And I read them and I gave you feedback, but it was very, I would say, looking at that feedback now, I would say it was fairly generic. And the only thing that you'd actually asked me for was, do I feel I'm missing a prologue? And because I read the prologue at the end of that 60,000 words, and I was like, no, I don't in any way feel that I'm missing the prologue. In fact, having read all 60,000 words and then the prologue, I still don't think that the prologue adds anything right now. So I think you can easily cut it. And that was it. That was basically the feedback.
Yeah, well, that's
yeah.
At that moment is when I was, I'd written that prologue. I was very excited about it. And then before we met, I started doubting myself, because my answer has always been, don't write a prologue. Prologues are worthless. You will do it wrong every time. And with this prologue, I thought I was clever enough to go, okay, here's all the bad reasons why people do prologues, and I can actually overcome that. And then at the end of the day, and I think I did as good of a job as you could possibly do. And yet at the end of the day, I was still like, it's still worthless. Like, it still doesn't do anything. Like, you still shouldn't do it. Like, even knowing the pitfalls of writing a prologue and all the ways that they're just dumb and don't do what you think they actually do, and paying attention to those and on purpose trying to avert those, I still couldn't avert them. I still couldn't get around them. So yeah, that was when that time, and it's now cut. Although it's not cut because it just has more relevance later. And so they became epilogues or prologues of future volumes of that series.
So yeah, I'm still keeping my prologues on Sangwheel, but they're short. They're like 3-4 pages, and normally the villain's actions. So
Right.
And because I don't write anything else from the villain's perspective.
And really, I'm talking about the prologue in that first book.
Yeah.
Because you haven't earned, I talk about that all the time. You have to earn your loyalty of your readers. And in that first book, you haven't earned jack.
Yeah.
So I've always done prologues for like second books, third books, and all of those. And I usually do what you're talking about, where they're written from the villain's perspective. But the reality is when you really come down to nuts and bolts, you have not earned jack. And that first prologue is always wrong. And if you're listening to this and you're like, no, I love my prologue, I promise you it's not doing what you think it does.
So I will stick with my prologue.
No, it's fine.
But as I say, my prologue is super short.
Yeah.
Because it shows the death that kicks off everything else. And that's all. You're in the head of the guy who's dying.
Right.
But that being said, when I looked at Genesis Oblivion the other night, when we were looking at the punctuation marks, I had a lot more to comment on. Because I was like, I don't like this. And I think like it came home to me as well when I was looking at the start of Genesis Oblivion, and you like the one where it really hit me was you had those words next to each other in the same paragraph, and I was like, if you just pressed enter and made each of those words stand alone all by themselves, they would have an enormous impact. And that was when I realized how much I'd grown, not in terms of my own writing, but in terms of looking at yours and seeing ways that it could be improved, not rewriting it, but areas where it could be improved.
Right. Well, and that's a part of one of my Drakeisms, where you have to go through the 5 stages of editing grief. And that's why I say you have to edit other people's work or you will not get better as a writer, because you will always see, you have to learn what the issue is. And that's, one of the steps, but then you have to be able to see it in other people's writing, because you still won't see it in yours. You're just too close to that, but you're not close to other people. So once you learn this aspect that, that is bad, you'll see it in other people's. But eventually, as you start catching other people's, it will bleed over and you'll start seeing your own. So I say you have to be a part of a writer's group. Shameless plug for joining the writer's room. There's a link down below, I'm sure. So you should think about that, because if you want to grow as a writer, I will definitely. I mean, that's the one thing. This is kind of funny. It's almost a commercial of how I can help somebody become a better writer. So if you want to work with me on a weekly basis, I've launched a platform that literally allows you to work with me on a weekly basis without paying my exorbitant private consulting fees, or without having to start a podcast with me and do all the work. So much cheaper way to get that. But anyway, yeah, I mean, that's what I've seen. That's what I said. I'm not blowing smoke when I say, when I read your stuff now, it is scary impressive. Like there's some things that I'm just, and again, plenty of things for you to work on, but I'm just saying, just the way you're writing now, it's just beautiful. And so, yeah, I mean, and I'm happy to, that you feel like I had any impact on that at all. I mean, that's fantastic.
No, I mean, this podcast was my primary learning vehicle. This podcast was, so I've got a great editor who helped me a lot, but an editor only gets you so far.
Yeah.
You have to write fairly clean. And then Critique Circle helped me a lot in terms of critiquing other people's work. But this podcast singularly is where I learned basically my writer's craft skills. So if you are a listener who has also learned a lot from us, comment down below, let me know what you think, and what you've learned from us and how you feel that your writing has improved. I guess we should also talk about, we hit it off in a lot of ways, and that is despite the fact that we are in some ways very different people.
Oh yeah.
So I am I think in American terms, I'm probably like miles to the left of any of you. But that's an artifact of living in Europe. So
Right.
Europe's economic nature is far more left-leaning than America's. We would see your left as kind of center-rightish in Europe. But and we have had differences that we have discussed and occasionally gone like, okay, well, we have an irreconcilable difference and we're going to walk away from the topic.
Yeah. Yeah, because one of the things that you guys don't ever hear is several times, I mean, often before the podcast or after the podcast, we will start talking about a political thing or a social thing that we are very much on different sides of, and it will get heated. But who cares?
Yeah.
Just because we have a different opinion doesn't mean that the other person is a bad person. It just means we have a different way of looking at the world. And the reason why we discuss it is we're trying to show the other person how we view the world. And sometimes, one of us nudges or both of us nudge a little bit, closer to the center. And other times we're like, well, let's not discuss this anymore.
Yeah.
Like we're obviously so entrenched in this belief that there's just no reason to discuss it. So yeah. And that's the other thing that because I can't have that with any of my American people. If you're from America, if somebody disagrees with you, they're evil. And so that's one of the reasons why I probably talk with you more about politics and social things than anyone else on the planet, because you're the only one that I can actually just talk to and not have you go, well, you're just a piece of garbage human being and I'm never speaking to you again. And it's like, man. So that's been a very nice thing that, 5 years ago you could do in America.
Yeah.
Just you can't anymore.
It's been very interesting from my perspective because, of course, I have very little bone in a fight with regards to American politics. I mean, and we're not going to discuss Finnish politics because you have no bones in our fight, and you wouldn't be able to read the news even if you did.
But I find it fascinating when you do go down that because it is so different. I mean, that's the other thing. It's not just politics. And I guess I should say this because the way we're talking about this, it makes me sound like I'm a, right-wing Trump, whatever. I am also left-wing when it comes to it. The way I describe myself is I am a social liberal, but a fiscal conservative. I do believe that you should be able to, have to pay for things, but I also believe we're one of the richest countries in the world, so we shouldn't have things like homelessness and poverty and all of that. So, that's why I don't really have a political party, because both sides have things that are actually smart and both sides have things that are really, really stupid. So, I never like to say I'm in the middle because I'm not in the middle. I'm on the left on certain issues and I'm on the right on certain issues. Because I'm a firm believer, and I'll just say this and we'll leave it at this. I'm a firm believer that if you believe 100% of a political side, you're not using your brain, you're indoctrinated, because no one agrees with anyone. I don't agree with my wife 100% of the time. Like no one will agree with anything 100%. So if you find yourself like, oh no, I'm left and I agree with 100% of everything they say, and I disagree with 100% of everything the right says, then you're indoctrinated. You do not have a brain of your own, because it's literally physically impossible to agree with everything and both in what they agree with and what they disagree with. It's impossible. Nobody can do it. So I'll just leave it there.
That whole kind of mindset is, or that left-right, very strict left-right mindset is very much, I found, an English and American thing, and it's dependent on your voting system. Because you have a first past the post system, you have to have two parties. You can't have any more than that. It's pointless, right? And because in Finland and in most of Europe, we have representative democracies, we tend to have a lot more coalition governments. Now, coalition governments have their problems as well. I mean, Belgium will tell you they had no government for 18 months while they couldn't get a coalition hammered out. But we have systems in place to deal with that. And sometimes the coalitions collapse, like the Netherlands. And then there's headlines like, the Netherlands government collapses. And then it's like, oh, right, no, that's what governments do in coalition. And it doesn't mean they've actually collapsed.
Because if you ever read the news, the American government has collapsed. all hell's gonna break loose. Like it's just that's the end of times. The Antichrist has shown up. Like everything is gonna be dead. But that's also been really interesting, is having a really good friend that is 100% a foreigner. Because that's another thing that has been really interesting to explore. I think, at least from my side, and I think it also from your side, of just growing up in the cultures that we grew up in, and how much it actually has shaped the way we view certain things and the way we, the way we are. So that's been also really enjoyable to explore with you. You know, because if you allow yourself to actually not fight for your side, but just try to understand the other side, it's amazing of how much I've learned about what it means to be American by looking at what it means to be American through Finnish eyes.
Yeah.
Like, because I never did that before. I only looked at what it's like to be an American through American eyes. And so I only saw the one narrow view. And so by being challenged and being, and to be challenged, it means you have to allow yourself to be challenged. Like you have to be open to be challenged. And so, before we all started, I was just red-blooded American. I'm American. That's what I am. And I never thought differently until we started really hanging out as good friends. Because I've had tons of foreigners that are friends, but nothing like our relationship. And nothing with the openness that we have off air, not on air. Although this has been kind of more treading on the open side. But yeah, so that's been really, really enjoyable as well through this podcast. It's just, I've never really looked at American living and American psychology through a completely foreign way of looking at my culture, which has been really cool. And I've grown.
It was also, it's been fascinating for me as well, because let me tell you something. America's culture as portrayed online, and it doesn't matter who, like it doesn't matter whether it's a right or a left person or whatever. The American culture that you see online is extreme. Okay?
Right.
It is either an extreme right-wing, person shooting and PS90 and telling you how amazing this rifle is that they're shooting 300 bullets out in a minute, or it's like a person that is so far left that even I'm like, I think you've fallen off a cliff there.
Yeah, that is funny. I didn't think about that. How many times I've said, look, I get that you think that we're like that, but there's literally no one in this country like that. Like, and you're just like, oh no, everyone in your country is like this. I'm like, no, literally, there's there's 3 guys in, whatever, in the mountains of the Appalachia, maybe, that have that. But that's it. It's literally it. No one in America feels that way. So yeah, that's been funny too. Kind of breaking those stereotypes, because we're not as bad as you think we are.
No. I mean, one assumes
I was talking
that
to the
you hear
audience.
the extreme. You hear the extreme, but
right.
But there are a lot of there's a lot of extreme online American voices.
So that was also interesting, kind of running into when you're like, oh no, you guys are like this, and I'm like, literally for 54 years, no one is like that. No one. So that's been interesting too. But again, that's also me seeing my culture from an outsider's perspective and going, wow, because you get that all the time. We have our own internal jokes where it's like, why do foreigners hate Americans? Because, well, when they're in their country with their language and we go, hey, where's the bathroom? And they don't understand us, we just speak louder. Hey, like, because that's going to solve the language barrier. So we pick on ourselves all the time for stupid stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, these 100 episodes have just been, just from a personal level, from a professional level, from a friendship level, from a spiritual level, there's just been growth across the board, just working with someone else this close on a weekly basis and talking about these topics.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. And when I came across for Comic-Con, it was fantastic. It was fantastic to experience, because I've been to America before, but I've never stayed with a local. It's always been kind of hotels and that kind of thing. And I was under the firm impression that American food sucks. Yeah, I was convinced of it because it didn't matter where I went, like on which tourist recommendation, everything tasted sweet. There was too much food in every way possible. And it was poor, everything was poor quality. I was like, but everything tastes bad. Even like high quality steakhouses and whatever, it's not good. But then I learned, like in the Strip, that America does have great food, but you need to like have local knowledge. Otherwise, you're just gonna end up in like the mass produced side of life, and it's just gonna taste like crap. So
Yeah, that's the problem is that for the most part, America has gone big corporate.
yeah,
So when you go that route, you know, you're basically, it doesn't matter where, like you could eat one of the high end chain steakhouses, but you're just eating McDonald's. It's the same thing. So yeah, that's when you get into those mass produced, everything has to be the same. If you walk into a TGI Fridays in California or walk into a TGI Fridays in Florida, it's the exact same food, same everything. There's no difference. And to do that, yeah, the quality isn't always the best.
yeah. So I learned a lot about America from a local perspective on this trip that I'd never experienced before. It was just very different from all my other American trips. From our perspective, I guess as well, like it was, yes, getting to meet you was amazing. And, I'd love, planning on coming back to America, not next year, year after maybe, and so on. It was great to spend time in person, but it also wasn't like uh, I don't know, like because we do spend at least an hour every week together, and we have done for 2 years.
Yeah. I said that to you when I picked you up at the airport. I said,
Yeah.
I thought I was going to feel different about this, but it's just you.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, let's go.
The only thing I learned was you had legs, and I had assumed that you had legs.
True. And then I actually wear pants sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a funny thing because I really did think that I was going to be, I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting, but I felt like when I picked you up from the airport, there'd just be this weird new thing. And it
Yeah.
was just like, oh, look, there's Marie. Let's go.
Yeah.
Get in the car.
I was just like, I was sure it was gonna feel different. It was gonna be like a thing, and then I was like, oh no, I like it's track. Like,
Yeah. 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 I mean, you know, that's a reflection of something that I think is still just amazing of the world we live in, that we've become as good of friends as we would have been had we lived in the same town, and yet we live literally on the opposite sides of the world. Literally. And there's no way we could have ever met before the internet. Not a
yeah,
chance we would ever even accidentally run into each other.
yeah.
So that is, we live in an amazing time
We
for stuff
do.
like this.
We really
And
do.
with the video, and even like, I don't think like, you hear the stories. I'm older than you, but back when I was younger, you have the stories. I never did it, but you had the pen pals, and it was like, oh, we really got to know each other or whatever. And you get that heartwarming story that 20, 30 years down the road, they actually meet in person and it's this big thing. But you also hear the stories of, oh yeah, no, I fell in love with this girl, and she was all this way, and then I met her in person, and her name is actually Jim, and she's in jail, and she's in there for serial murder, and it's like, right, you can say anything you want in a letter, whereas
Yeah,
with the video conference that we have now, it's instant. I mean, there's almost no lag. There is a little bit of lag, but it literally is not even noticeable now. It's not like speaking to somebody on Mars where it takes 17 minutes for the communication to get back and forth. So yeah, it's amazing to
yeah.
live in the time that we live in.
And it would not, I mean, it would not have the same effect with just voice either.
Mm-mm.
Like, it's really the video. The video changed everything.
And I even like, so we last night during the podcast, some people had some quality issues on their not on the podcast, on the critique group that I did, had some quality issues on their bandwidth, and so we all turned off our video. And then it gets to me, and I'm critiquing this one person who I've, he's been with me for a couple of years now, and I basically said, this is literally the weakest thing you've ever brought. This is your worst. Like, you've taken such a huge step backwards, and I can't see his face. And so it's like, now I'm stuttering, and I'm like, now I'm not trying to be mean or anything like that. And I caught myself just like over trying to compensate because I can't see him. I just see a picture of him, in the window. And so, yeah, the being able to see people and those facial expressions. And we've talked about this before, about writing, dialogue and prose. Only about 70% of what you get from a conversation is the words that people say. The other 25% is facial expressions, body language, gestures, all of those things. And so those are very, very important to human conversation.
In fact, there's a study that says when it comes to emotional communication, obviously not word communication, don't misquote me here. When it comes to emotional communication, only 7% is the actual words. The rest of the emotional content all comes from body language, your tone of voice, your expression, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, the words.
Sarcastic in email.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, the words still communicate, what you're saying. Like, as I say, like that 7% figure is related to emotional content. Yeah. So, something to think about.
Yeah. So this had nothing to do with writing. We talked a lot about just the journey. I mean, it was the 100th episode. That's pretty amazing. And I never thought.
And we wrote a book together.
We wrote a book together. Like, that's crazy. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this has just it's been a wonderful experience. I hope you guys have enjoyed, coming along this journey with us. I hope that you've also learned a few things. But yeah, I mean, this has just been, I don't know if this is going to be a popular episode, but both of us felt like we should just talk about just kind of, we've never really reflected on the journey. Yeah. We just did it. We just do it week after week after week. And that's really it. We have time before the podcast and after the podcast where we talk about personal stuff, but we still have never really reflected on everything that we've gained from each other and how the relationship has impacted each one of us and all of that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode.
Yep. I think that is a good place to end our 100th episode, and we will see you soon for 101.
Bye.